Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Did his wife leave him or not? That's what this part of the story is about. Enjoy the show! I jotted down some notes to help me focus on my next steps so I could move forward instead of standing still. Suddenly, I realized that I was hungry. This was a good sign for me. I rummaged through the refrigerator and pulled out the leftovers of my favorite meal that Sharon had prepared for me last night. After all, why throw away good food? After cleaning up after myself, I realized that this entire house was a monument to my former life, which only made my pain worse. It had to disappear. That same Friday evening, I drove to a nearby U-Haul store, where I purchased a dozen large moving packing boxes, as well as other packing materials. I then rented an enclosed U-Haul trailer and brought it home. I went into Cheryl's room and started packing all of her things into boxes, using my natural Tetris engineering skills to make the most of the available space. I had no idea that a 17-year-old girl could have so many clothes. I carefully folded and packed everything, including her curtains. Once everything was packed and taped, I began to dismantle all the furniture in her room and carried each piece onto the trailer using a hand truck. There were 2 things from her room that I didn't pack: her cell phone and a special book of philosophers that Wesley had given her as a high school graduation gift. I'm sure they wanted her to take it with her since it was special to him, but she buried it in the trash can in her room under other trash. I chuckled at her cunning. God, how I miss this girl. I threw the book away along with the rest of the trash. Once everything was loaded, I placed all the boxes of her things in the trailer along with the furniture. Sharon was right. It looked like Cheryl didn't take many things from her past life with her, not even her underwear. Surprisingly, I never found the laptop and scientific calculators I gave her. I wondered if she was forced to return them or sell them. I tried not to think. Thinking leads to pain. It was midnight when I finished. Cheryl's room and closet were empty. I was physically and emotionally exhausted. I fell onto the bed in the guest bedroom and slept like the dead. I will never sleep in the bed I shared with Sharon again. On Saturday morning, I showered, shaved, and made myself breakfast. I tried to use up items in the refrigerator before they spoiled. By mid-morning, I found myself at a nearby storage unit where I had rented a space big enough for all of Cheryl's things. I asked myself 1,000 times why I kept her things. I didn't have a good answer. I just wanted to do it. I didn't have this attitude towards the rest of my family. Getting rid of their things in the future would be easy enough if I made that decision. Once I returned the trailer to U-Haul, I picked up some local flyers at the grocery store that advertised local apartments for rent. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I had signed a lease for a monthly apartment a few miles from my place of work. Not wanting to sit alone in an empty house, I went to dinner at a decent family restaurant and then saw 2 films in a row at the cinema. It was 11 p.m. when I returned to the guest bedroom. I had a restless night as my thoughts returned to the confrontation. To erase the memories of this day, I would gladly give a leg. After preparing breakfast for myself on Sunday morning, I loaded my car with my clothes and personal items and moved them into my furnished apartment. It took me 3 trips to move everything I wanted to keep. Of course, I didn't take with me a single thing that Sharon had ever bought. All this was left in the bedroom. It was good for my state of mind and was part of my strategy for recovering from such a terrible loss that no one but me was mourning. I called my boss on Monday morning, asking for a week off due to an urgent family matter. I had a 6-week vacation, so there were no problems. After preparing the last breakfast in the refrigerator, I went about my business. My first to-do item was calling 3 agencies: Goodwill, the Salvation Army, and Habitat for Humanity. I told them that due to a tragic loss in the family, everything in the house was available on a first-come, first-served basis. The organizations could take anything and everything from the house without restrictions, and I hoped that they would completely empty the house. It took several trips and 3 days, but all the furniture, appliances, and most clothes were gone. I donated all the food I didn't take into my apartment to a local food bank. On Thursday, I made an appointment with a cleaning service to remove everything left behind as trash. They brought in a full 4-person crew on Thursday and Friday to clean the house inside and out. During the spring cleaning, I took Sharon's car to the car market and sold it. Of course, Cheryl's expensive Audi didn't stay in the house. On Friday morning, a realtor recommended to me by my colleague Robert inspected the house and listed it for sale. She offered to make the house more marketable, but I just wanted to get rid of it and told her to get a better price for a quick sale. After canceling service on their 4 phones, I stopped by a local domestic violence shelter and donated Sharon's, Conrad's, and Jocelyn's phones. They will be used as emergency telephone numbers for women who have been threatened or abused. For unknown reasons, I was never able to part with Cheryl's phone, so I left it in my apartment. I thought about changing my number but decided not to. If kids want to contact me for any reason, I want to be available. If it was a cathartic experience for me, everything that reminded me of my former life was systematically dismantled and removed. I was exhausted. Mental exercises required a lot of strength. I decided to crash on the couch for the weekend and watch some mindless entertainment on TV. After dinner, I decided to listen to Cheryl's phone to feel at least a little closer to her. Like the others, Sharon erased all photos, texts, and contact numbers from her phone. However, she missed a folder that contained about 20 of Cheryl's favorite songs saved directly as MP3 music files that did not rely on the internet or a connection. I thought of including a few bars of each, imagining us listening to them together. These were songs by popular artists of that time. When I started playing a song called Quander, I was shocked to hear Cheryl's voice speaking to me. "Hey, Dad, no matter what you think, I love you more than anything in this world." Mom read us all the arrangement about how everything was going to happen when you faced this. "We were all forced to beg you to let Wesley adopt us all. I don't want this. I don't want to leave you and I don't want to leave our house, but I have my own reasons for this. I can't say what they are in case my mother finds this message. My whole life betrays you, but I will fix it if it's the last thing I do." Cheryl's voice began to tremble with tears. "I love you forever, Daddy. I'm still a daddy's girl. She loves me. My precious daughter still loves me." I cried a lot as the wounds reopened. However, her words were like a salve for my soul. I knew that I would never stop loving her either. I have no idea what she thinks she can do to fix the situation. I mean, she's a smart girl with an indomitable spirit, but what can a 17-year-old do? I just want her to be safe and happy. It is my greatest wish to see her again. I returned to work on Monday. Robert and I had lunch together, and I told him about the tragedy that had become my life. He is a good person and probably my best friend. He wasn't surprised at how quickly I finished the house because he is also a highly skilled engineer, but he was amazed at the cruel, narcissistic way in which Sharon abandoned me and took the children away. 10 days later, I had an offer to buy the house. I accepted it to get permission after paying off the small remaining mortgage. I ended up with $1,307,000. Robert gave me great advice. I met with a financial advisor who helped minimize the tax burden on the $3 million I recently deposited into my account. There's no way to stop the IRS from taking some of it, but through the purchase of municipal bonds and a few other investments, he helped me save the bulk of it. The money from the sale of the house was transferred into a new mortgage, but I had a deadline to invest in my new home to avoid capital gains tax. "It looks like you took the best steps you could on the financial front, Keith. I'm glad things worked out for you," Robert said. "Thanks to you, Robert. You gave me wise advice, and I appreciate it. I'm happy to help my friend any way I can, and in return, I hope you can do me a favor." "Of course, Robert. Just tell me what you need." "That's my wife Doris, you know. When she has an idea, she won't rest until she gets it done." "What do you mean?" "She wants you to come over for dinner this Saturday. From what you told me, Doris is a great cook. I'd love to join you. She's the best cook I know, but that's not the problem, Keith. She wants to set me up like a lamb to the slaughter." "Oh, that's it. Her sister Dawn will be there too. My wife wants to set you up, and I don't like it, but she won't let me rest until I convince you to join us for dinner." "Oh, I see," I chuckled. "You know full well that I have absolutely no interest in a new relationship. My last relationship turned me into coal. But before I get a stomach virus and can't visit, what can you tell me about her? As for looks, she's stunningly beautiful. She has a good job as a lawyer. She's divorced, doesn't have kids, and is, say, 5 years younger than you. Sounds perfect, but I feel like you're saying, but what's the catch? You're right, Keith. I'm not going to lie to you. To be honest, she's very broken. She's been recovering from her injuries for almost 2 years now. I've told Doris about your situation, and she thinks you both might be able to help each other heal. You were both betrayed and deceived. Honestly, I'm not sure it's a bad idea, but I don't like to interfere. Doris has no such hesitation. I don't want you to suffer because of me. Robert, if it helps you get rid of her, tell Doris I'll be there on Saturday. But it'll just be one time, right? She's not going to try to get us together again and again? No, I'll make sure it's just this one time. Dawn is probably even less inclined to do it than you are. Doris will have to work hard to convince her to come at the same time, but I have no doubt that she will do it. If Dawn comes, I will treat her with nothing less than respect. I already know this about you, Keith, which is why I trust you with my daughter-in-law. What's her story? I'm afraid I can't tell you. It's her story that she has to share with you herself, just like Doris and I didn't tell her your story. We respect you both too much. But if you ask her politely, she might reveal it to you. Okay. What time on Saturday? At 6:30. And Keith, if you do this for me, I'll owe you one. Thanks for taking the pressure off me, he laughed. I was apprehensive about returning to the dating world. I don't know how she did it, but Doris convinced Dawn to come to the party. We were introduced to each other by Robert and Doris. At the same time, she was very sweet, with that girl next door look. During dinner, Doris and Robert asked Dawn and me pointed questions to which they already knew the answers, but which revealed interesting details about each other. By the time dinner was over, the awkwardness seemed to have subsided. We realized that none of us were monsters and nothing bad would happen that night. The matchmakers insisted that we sit and talk in the living room while they washed the dishes. I could have washed each plate 3 times, dried them, and put them away during the time they had been dragging out their absence for our benefit. I hope I'm not the ogre Robert and Doris made me out to be, I joked. And I hope you don't think I came here on a broomstick, she replied humorously. I'd tell you about my work as a lawyer, but explaining patent law to an outsider is like watching paint dry for fun. I'm afraid my job as a rocket scientist is made even more boring by the constant calculations required, I replied. Doris and Robert are wonderful and have the best intentions. I'm sure they'll be questioning both of us tomorrow after our meeting. Well, why don't we hold off on our reports until we have a chance to have a real first date? Is that what you're willing to do? I asked, crossing my fingers. Her smile said it all. I would like to. Can you pick me up tomorrow at 10:30 a.m., take me to church, and then have lunch together? Her request made me jump as if from awakening. Just send me the address, and I'll come, I said optimistically. What surprised me about her invitation was that, before meeting Sharon, I went to church fairly regularly. My parents raised me in the faith, and I attended services off and on, even in college. But Sharon came into my life, and I suddenly realized that I had allowed her to seduce me and drive me away from the church because of her fascination with secular philosophy. Sharon was a strong believer in agnosticism, and unfortunately, it affected me too. The realization that I needed to return to church came to me like a revelation. We attended the service together, and I put my arm around her back. The singer asked us to open hymns to a song I knew well, and it hit me between the eyes. His 4 daughters had died at sea in a shipwreck during a strong storm. His wife, Anna, was found holding the bar and rescued. Having received a message from Anna, he immediately went to her. One day, while traveling, the captain invited him to the bridge of the ship. He explained that they were passing over the exact place where his daughters had died. He returned to his cabin and wrote the following words. When peace like a river attends my way. When sorrows like sea billows roll. Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say. It is well with my soul. It was not lost on me that Horatio Spafford lost his 4 daughters. I recently lost 3 children and my wife. Instead of cursing God, his faith enveloped his broken heart in a love and peace that surpasses all understanding. My eyes opened to a realization that had eluded me for far too long. As the fog gathered around my broken heart, I sang this song with the crowd with great pleasure. It was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I say friendship because neither of us was ready to make any kind of commitment given our similar histories. When we started dating seriously, we both believed that our relationship was exclusive, although we did not verbally discuss it. After 2 months of enjoying each other's company, I finally found the courage to ask her, I know that everything we've shared so far hasn't been too close. I'm not pressuring you in any way. What I mean is that I feel close enough to ask you about your story. Are you ready to share it with me now? She looked deep into my eyes. I wanted them to show compassion, and I found it. You go first. If you tell me your story, then I'll tell you mine. Okay, I replied. I told her the highlights of my life, from the first time I met Sharon until the day she and the kids walked out of my life. And that's why it would be hard for me to trust another woman. I know not all women are like Sharon, but she broke something inside of me that hasn't fully healed yet. Dawn's eyes filled with tears as I shared my story of suffering. What a cruel and callous betrayal. Sharon is an evil, mean woman. I'm sorry that you were used like that, Keith, and then abandoned when things went south for them. No one deserves what they did to you. I'm sorry. I'm getting better day by day, and honestly, you're helping me a lot. Okay, you've heard my story. Now it's your turn, I said. With these words, she smiled a pale smile. I realized that this would be painful for her, so I took her hand for support. I was married for 11 years to Rex. We were madly in love and happy for the first few years. Our only point of contention was the level of intimacy. He had a healthy appetite for intim, much more than I did. As an obedient wife, I tried to satisfy all his needs, but in the end, it became a terrible responsibility for me, and this unfortunately began to manifest itself. I did not want this, but I had no choice. After our 10th anniversary, he decided that we needed to open up our marriage and expand our horizons. I squeezed her hand for support, imagining where this could lead. She told a very sad story. Her ex-husband put illegal substances in her alcohol and forced her to do disgusting things with other men. Dawn cried, remembering this event. The memories of that night were very painful for her. I would never do this, I swear. I wasn't raised that way. But at that moment, he took control of me. When I started to come to my senses, I saw Rex checking his phone. He recorded the whole scene. I thought that I would become a bad person and wanted to leave immediately, but he insisted. He said that since I got what I had now, it was his turn. He contacted 2 other women at the same time. She continued her story. After that night, Rex became obsessed with humiliating and abusing me with other men. I couldn't take it anymore. I left him and filed for divorce. He threatened me, saying that he owned me and that he would never let me go. Doris and Robert graciously allowed me to stay with them while I was divorcing Rex. Robert never allowed Rex into the house while I was there with them. He is a wonderful man and a protective brother-in-law. The divorce was ultimately approved against my wishes. Dawn paused to take a sip of water before continuing. Unfortunately, this is not the end of my story. I wish it were. I met Dustin through a client of the law firm I was working for. We hit it off immediately. There was something about the chemistry we had between us. He was very kind and compassionate. He seemed to be everything that Rex was not, and I began to trust him with my heart. It seemed that everything with him was destined. 9 months later, he proposed to me, and we set a wedding date. I looked forward to an idyllic life with him. She continued. Dustin texted me one afternoon, asking me to meet him at the hotel restaurant. I didn't know if I trusted him at the time, but he put something in my drink. When I became lethargic and couldn't resist, acting like a perfect gentleman, he helped me up, took me into the elevator, and into the hotel room I had reserved. There, he carefully laid me on the bed. Then his manner suddenly changed to aggressive. He showed me 3 candid photographs of the evening that Rex had arranged. He spluttered as he spoke that my intimate contact with this man happened only 3 days ago and that he had just found out about it. He insulted me, called me derogatory names, and declared that he could never marry someone like me. And he left. Everything I said, he decided it was all over. Of course, I immediately recognized the person in the photos as the one I was with at the club with Rex before we broke up. Rex had printed those photos and given them to Dustin to break up our engagement, and it worked. My downfall was that I didn't tell Dustin about that night because I was so ashamed and disgusted. But that happened long before I met Dustin, and it shouldn't have mattered. Dawn's tears intensified. As soon as Dustin slammed the door behind him, Rex appeared and confessed his plan to ruin my relationship with Dustin and get me back. He reminded me that he owned me forever and was going to take control of my life. That night, he explained that he had provided Dustin with a cocktail of substances for my drink so Dustin could get some revenge and leave me in my humiliated state. Dustin didn't know about Rex's plans for that night. 3 of his friends used me while he was recording it all to blackmail me. He said he might publish the edited version online to make money. He called me his night slave and expected me to fulfill all his demands. From then on, I was devastated and felt broken on many levels. My fiancée not only believed the lie and ceremoniously dumped me, but also deceived and betrayed me in the worst possible way by setting this trap. I didn't see a way out. If I went to the police, it would only be my word against Rex's and would lead to nothing. My salvation came from an unexpected source. An unknown woman who introduced herself as an artisan came to my office at the end of the workday one week, asking to meet me at a restaurant around the corner from my office as soon as I finished work. She said she had a treat for dinner and wanted to discuss something important. I didn't feel threatened since it was a public place, so I went. After ordering, she handed me a memory device, saying that there was an unedited copy of the recording of what they did to me. Rex mistakenly provided an unedited copy. Clint, Anne's husband and one of the 3 who did this to me, was shown in the video as well. The video showed evidence that something had been slipped into my drink as 4 men discussed my deliberate incapacitation. The edited version had been stripped of all such conversations and evidence. Rex's threats to me were also included. And said she was divorcing Clint because this was his second case of infidelity and she did not want to be married to a criminal. I took the evidence to the district attorney, who prosecuted them all. Rex received a 12-year prison sentence and is still behind bars. The rest received slightly shorter sentences. These experiences of betrayal and violence will never leave me, but I refuse to let them define me. I'm not the person Rex tried to turn me into. I saw how much Dawn was ashamed to share such intimate information about the tragedy she had experienced. The roles were reversed, and tears were now rolling down my cheeks for the mistreatment of this kind and wonderful woman who had endured so much. I'm so sorry, Dawn. I didn't know. You didn't deserve your fate any more than I deserved mine. Now I understand why Robert and Doris call us both broken souls. I was broken, but my faith helps me overcome the past and frees me from the chains that bound me. One day, the right person will see my true worth and integrity. I hope that day comes soon. She smiled at me as we wiped each other's tears. I hope so too, Keith. As we grew closer, Dawn wanted to help me heal and leave the past behind. Even though I knew in my heart it was the right thing to do, knowing what needed to be done and being able to do it were 2 different things. Dawn knew I loved the author C.S. Lewis. She reminded me of his words, "If you love deeply, you will suffer greatly, but it will still be worth it." I thought about it. It is true that before I was blinded, I deeply loved Sharon and all 3 children. At that time, I would have gladly given my life for any of them. But was it worth it? Do I really wish I had never met Sharon? Although I had wished for this hundreds of times since the confrontation occurred, I realized that I was happy throughout all those years, right up to the end. Does this really mean anything? I live by the proverb ignorance is bliss. This was definitely true in my case. Was my entire married life a waste of time, even though it was based on lies and deceit? I was never unhappy. If I was honest with myself, I realized that I was falling in love with Dawn. She never pressured me to move on from the past, just expressed a desire to help me through the healing that I knew I needed. We enjoyed each other on levels that I had never experienced with Sharon. Every day, she slightly eroded the concrete that I had surrounded my heart with for protection. The walls began to crumble and fall. We talked about our growing love, being open and honest every step of the way. There were no unspoken or hidden feelings between us. This openness was like breathing in fresh air for a person drowning underwater. Dawn had a 2-year head start on me in overcoming the past. She had already told me that she loved me and convinced me that such a confession was a big step for her. I completely agreed with this. One day, Dawn said to me, "Keith, I can only show you the door to love. You have to walk through it yourself." It reminds me of the old saying, "Dawn, when one door closes, another opens." "That's true," she replied, "but there is a second part of this saying that is often forgotten. We so often look so long and with such regret at closed doors that we do not see those that have opened for us." At that moment, the last of my resistance collapsed. I realized that I was holding myself back. I was allowing the pain of my past to get in the way of the joy of my future. Is this how I wanted to live the rest of my life? Absolutely not. I had to open my heart to love again and learn to trust. I needed to trust Dawn the same way she had learned to trust me. I had finally overcome the self-built barrier to happiness and was now confidently walking towards it. From then on, it was Dawn and Keith, no holds barred. I was in love again, and I knew it. 5 months later, I proposed to her on one knee. Her answer made me the happiest person in the world. We set a wedding date for a few months ahead. Dawn helped me choose a 4-room house where we would begin our new life together. I put all the money from the sale of my old house into the new one, along with our significant down payment. Within 2 months, it was fully furnished. We decided to save our first intimate experience for our wedding night. Today, many may consider it old-fashioned, but it was what we both wanted. 4 months later, she had almost completely moved into our house. She only kept a minimal amount of stuff in her apartment so she could spend the night there and change for work, but most of her things were already included in our home. I really enjoyed having her around. Life was great again, until one Friday afternoon when I received a mysterious message from Dawn. "We have a reservation at the Carriage House restaurant for tonight at 5:30. If you leave work at 5 o'clock and hurry, you should be on time. Try not to be late. This is very important." We had only been to this restaurant once before. It was inconveniently far from our house, but offered an eclectic menu. I had no idea why she wanted me to meet her there that day or why she was so insistent on the timing. Suddenly, a terrible premonition arose in my head, and I could not get rid of it. I wanted to dispel these thoughts of déjà vu as quickly as possible, so I replied to her message asking for more information, but there was no response. I tried to call her, but after a long ring, the phone went to voicemail and my call went unanswered. I was on the verge of panic as parallels with Sharon's betrayal flashed through my mind. Could something like this happen to me again? As soon as 5 o'clock came, I ran out of the office and rushed to the appointed place. I arrived there 3 minutes before the scheduled time. Luckily, Dawn was already sitting at the table waiting for me. Seeing her smile, I calmed down a little. I quickly joined her to find out what was going on. "I'll tell you all about it soon, Keith. Let's order first so we don't get distracted and can talk while we wait for the food." Her offer was reasonable. She asked me to order first since she was still choosing from the menu. After I finished, she ordered a surprising amount of food, enough for 2. "I missed lunch and I'm hungry," she explained. Since it was an expensive restaurant, I hoped she could eat everything. Dawn looked mysteriously at her watch without explaining why. Finally, my patience ran out, and I could not allow the unspoken purpose of today's meeting to remain unspoken. "What's going on, Dawn? You're scaring me. Are you going to betray me like Sharon did? Is your lover going to join us at the table? If that's what you ordered the extra food for, I'm leaving right now," I blurted out. "Just wait 2 more minutes, Keith. Just 2 minutes. I'm not asking for more, but I want you to prepare for the shock of your life." "Prepare, dear. You're about to get the biggest surprise." I was on the verge of a full-blown panic attack. Had this become my life, a series of betrayals and soul-destroying revelations? I didn't need more. Dawn looked at me anxiously, expecting something. I had no idea what was about to happen. Then it happened. A figure walked up behind me and sat down at the table next to me. "Hello, Father." I couldn't believe my eyes. It was my daughter, Cheryl. I exclaimed, jumping up and hugging her. Although she tried to contain her emotions, We both cried openly in each other's arms, holding each other tightly. Dawn also teared up, seeing how much it meant to both of us. I kissed Cheryl's teary cheeks, but these were tears of joy, not suffering, and I would choose these tears any day of the week and twice on Sunday. At that moment, the waiter awkwardly approached our table. I should have known that the extra food Dawn ordered was everyone's favorite food from Cheryl. I was ready to find out what factors contributed to this reunion. I can't tell you how glad I am to see you again, Cheryl. I thought I might have lost you forever. And how did you know Dawn? She found you and orchestrated all this. Forgive me, where are my manners? Let me make the proper introductions. Cheryl, this is Dawn Garrett, my fiancée, and Dawn, this is Cheryl. I'm guessing Stanton now? No, Dad. My last name is still Cheryl Carlisle and will remain that way until I get married. I never took his last name. What? But how is this possible? They insisted that I sign all the papers for all three of you. It's true. After he and Mom got married, Wesley's main goal was to legally adopt all three of us and give us his last name. I agreed to avoid constant arguing with them when our case went before the judge. Because of our age, the judge asked each of us to meet with him separately in his office. As you can guess, Conrad and Jocelyn both agreed to the adoption and change of name. Mom and Wesley brainwashed them into believing that now that our family was finally in its proper configuration, a last name change was a necessity to facilitate and secure our future inheritance. When the judge personally asked me about adoption and a last name change, I clearly told him that I would rather die than become a stand-in and that I would find a way to kill myself if that were the case. There would be coercion against my will. Fortunately, the judge believed me and allowed me to stay. Of course, Mom and Wesley were furious with me for several days, but I stood my ground. They threatened to cut me out of the will and deprive me of my future inheritance. I told them I didn't care. I love you more than anyone in the world, and I'm still Daddy's girl. She smiled. I was amazed by her deviant story and was very proud of her. What about a restraining order? Will we get in trouble for meeting tonight? I don't care, but I don't want you to get in trouble for it. I found out later that the restraining order was only in effect for 30 days. Dad and Wesley were just bluffing. Then why didn't you contact me sooner? Why did you wait so long? For 2 reasons. First, I knew I needed to be on the inside with them to gather as much information as possible. Second, Wesley and Mom made it clear that if I ever contacted you for any reason, they would destroy you financially and fire you from your job. I knew they were closely monitoring all my communications. They threatened to hire hackers to drain you of every penny you earned and get you fired. I couldn't risk you getting hurt because of me, so I had to wait until today. Why now? What has happened? My dear, since the day we parted, circumstances have changed, allowing me to be here today. I'll try to give you the short version of what I did. I'll tell you my part, and then Dawn will fill you in on the rest. I asked, surprised, yes, Dad? I'll start with the night we left you alone in the house so Mom and Wesley could chase their dreams. After playing for a while, we flew to Dallas, Texas, for a memorial service for the Stanton family and decided to stay at the mansion. The thought of leaving you behind and having fun in that huge mansion during the summer with those 2 weirdos didn't appeal to me. They knew I wasn't happy, and getting me on their side would be a difficult task. I asked Wesley to help me get a job at Kleinert Pharmaceuticals, a company in which they controlled a large stake. He was happy to get me a job as an intern in one of their labs. I was only 17, but I kept my eyes and ears open to find out as much as possible about the operation of the enterprise. Working full-time, I mostly avoided their attention. They spent most of the summer entertaining and buying things for the twins, which seemed to irritate them. I was a freshman at Georgia Tech that fall and was thrilled, even though I was always the youngest student in all my classes. Thank you again, Dad, for your support. Wesley and Mom insisted I take my graduation gift with me, a new Audi. I initially liked the car when it was given to me and became very attached to it. After breaking up with you, I realized that they were using it as a distraction to keep me happy with them. I quickly warmed up to it. Wesley delivered it to me at Georgia Tech. Since the car was registered only to me, I traded it in at an Atlanta dealership, which gave me $220,000 for it. I left the dealership with a 2-year-old Encore costing less than $1,125,000, which left me with $11,195 in my bank account for my needs. I decided not to tell them what I did with the Audi. I got a part-time job at a local Costco store nearby that fit my schedule and did not interfere with my studies. I didn't go back to Dallas to spend Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, or spring break with them, using work as an excuse. They didn't want me to work and offered to send me money. I said I would donate it to charity if they did this and explained that I wanted to earn my own living as Wesley had required. They were very upset that I did not come home. The only trip they insisted on was for the court hearing about the adoption. They sent me back and forth on a corporate jet, and, as I mentioned, they were very unhappy that I refused to adopt and change my last name. After my first year of college, I parked my car for the summer, and they sent me back to Dallas. By then, I was already 18, and my first year of study was behind me. I asked to work as an assistant to Dave Wilkins, the managing director of all projects at Kleinert Pharmaceuticals. He was a bachelor, and we started dating, although he was 12 years older than me. I understood that he was interested in me for my youth, appearance, and most importantly, because I was the daughter of his boss. Marrying me would strengthen his long-term prospects and position in the company. But don't worry, Dad, although we kissed, I explained to him that I didn't want to have an intim before marriage. He reluctantly agreed, hoping to avoid Wesley's wrath by going against his daughter's wishes. Please bear with me, Dad. I'm getting to the fun part. The breakthrough came one evening, about 2 months into the summer. Dave and I were at his house, drinking wine and watching a movie on his impressive home theater system. He was a connoisseur of fine wines and invited me to try the different drinks he had. I pretended to enjoy the wine, but in fact, I poured out my glass when he wasn't looking. He continued to fill our glasses until he became drunk. I began to ask him innocent questions about the company's pills and the processes that led to their approval and release. He felt comfortable with me in the confines of his home, and the wine loosened his tongue. I interrogated him unobtrusively, pretending to be just curious. Since he knew that I was Wesley's daughter, he felt safe divulging some company secrets that Wesley assumed he knew anyway. Dave was drunk when he admitted that the company's 2 most profitable pills initially had serious problems in the testing stage. He confessed that the trial data had been altered to obtain FDA approval. He did not have access to the original data, but a former senior employee was fired when he tried to raise the alarm. There was a trial that ended with a settlement agreement with non-disclosure of all details. Wesley's parents took an active part in this process. Dave continued to try to remember until he finally recalled the man's name, Hucum. I hope you don't mind, Dad, but I've been tracking you with a phone finder app. I'm glad you didn't change your number. I noticed that you were spending time in an apartment rented from Garrett. Out of curiosity, I wanted to know who this woman you were spending time with was. I looked her up on Google and found that she was a lawyer. Her work number was listed on the website of the law firm Grayland, Long, and Kirby, so I called her and introduced myself. She knew who I was from how much you told her about me. I was amazed to learn that she specializes in patent law, particularly pill patents. Hesitantly, I told her my story. Cheryl finished, that's where I came into play. Dawn interjected, now, before you get mad at me for keeping quiet, Cheryl came to my office and hired me as her lawyer. Using attorney-client privilege, I was legally unable to share information about her or her affairs with you without risking losing my license. Cheryl added, true, and besides, I didn't want you to relive old wounds until everything was settled and resolved. Dawn continued, as a lawyer, I have experience finding people with the help of a private investigator. Within 2 days, I received Hugh Kellum's file. When I contacted him, he refused to come to my office, so I had to go to him. He was very reserved about a non-disclosure agreement and showed me a copy of it, which stated that he was prohibited from talking to anyone about his previous work at Kleinert Pharmaceuticals except for direct employees of the company. Although I was an attorney, he could not legally talk to me, but I knew Cheryl could. So, I took her to his house, where she confirmed her status as an employee and then recorded his statement. Cheryl continued the conversation. Hugh was glad he could legally share his story without risking jail time. He was central to both projects. Initial pill trials showed an increased risk of heart attacks. Not wanting to delay lucrative products from coming to market, Kleiner Pharmaceuticals bribed an FDA official to ignore and alter data for approval and market release. Initial studies showed that several trial participants died from heart attacks, but these cases were never linked to the pills. Once the pills were approved by the FDA and marketed, all subsequent heart attacks were attributed to other causes. Since the pills were cleared by the FDA, Hugh had the original test documents as well as corrected documentation confirming the fraud. Dawn convinced him that he could legally give these documents to me as an employee of Kleiner Pharmaceuticals. He believed me when I explained that I wanted to get justice. Dawn resumed the conversation. After Cheryl gave me the files she had collected, I contacted the Department of Justice, which enthusiastically began an investigation into the alleged fraud and attempted to identify all culprits within the FDA. Wanting to minimize the risks to current users of the two pills, the Department of Justice expedited their investigation, confirmed that the allegations merited prosecution, and quickly filed criminal charges against Kleiner Pharmaceuticals. While Kleiner was preparing for its defense, details of the upcoming trial were leaked on Wall Street, causing investors to become reluctant to invest. The company's shares quickly lost value, turning Kleiner Pharmaceuticals into a company with shares worth pennies. Naturally, a class action lawsuit ensued on behalf of all the families of heart attack victims who took these pills. My law firm was more than happy to represent them. The pharmaceutical company's funds were exhausted. Keith, your daughter single-handedly destroyed the entire Stanton empire, Dawn concluded. I was amazed at the revelations the two women shared. It never occurred to them that karma would deal such a devastating blow. As much as I'm glad they failed, they still live in million-dollar mansions and have planes, yachts, and expensive cars. I don't think they'll suffer much from the lawsuit. Oh, but I haven't told you the best part yet, Dad. As an insider, I learned that the pharmaceutical company owned all the residences, yachts, planes, and cars through a shell company for tax purposes. The judge hearing the case ordered Kleiner Pharmaceuticals to liquidate all assets to allocate funds for the settlement. Wesley and Mom were given a week to leave the entire property, and they were quickly evicted. Essentially, Wesley and Mom were left penniless and homeless. They moved into a small apartment with Conrad and Jocelyn. My job illustrating children's books has been my main source of income, and my mom got her first job as a waitress at a local steakhouse. As for me, I'm safe and living in my dorm at Georgia Tech now. I don't want to upset you, but I'm similar to Mom in one aspect. Just like her, I played the long game. I'm wondering if you have a preference for where you'd like me to call home, Dad. I have always been and will always be your daughter. My love for you transcends any genetic or biological ties. I hugged my girl and happily accepted her back into my life. You will always be home with me, Cheryl with us. I said affirmatively, taking Dawn's hand and nodding my head in agreement. Both of our faces were washed with tears as we hugged and kissed each other on the cheeks, not wanting this moment to ever pass. God, how I love this girl. Well, I need to be back on campus Sunday night so I can be ready for classes on Monday. Dawn suggested that you might not mind if I spent the weekend with you before I fly out. As soon as this school year is over, I'll be back for the summer if you don't mind. This is more than normal, I insist. By the way, is that guy Dave Wilkins still in the game? Dave's a nice guy and actually a good kisser, but I'm not ready for a serious relationship yet. We broke up when the company went bankrupt and was sold. It seems like my status as Wesley's daughter somehow lost its appeal for him. It wasn't anything serious. I just needed to get closer to him to find a way to overthrow Wesley after they did this to you. Honestly, I don't want to see Wesley or Mom again if you want to know the truth. But Conrad and I feel sorry for Jocelyn now that they've gone down a few notches. Who knows what might happen? I enjoyed having my special daughter with me again. Now that she is 18, there are no questions about custody. She can live anywhere. We moved all of her old furniture and things I had stored into a room in our new house that she had chosen for herself. It was hard for me to watch her go back to Georgia Tech, but at the same time, I was excited for her. Cheryl promised to come back every holiday. I told her that round-trip tickets would always be waiting for her. When Dawn and I finally got married, it was a wonderful experience for both of us. She had many colleagues, friends, and family as support. She even asked Cheryl to be her maid of honor. We spent a week on a cruise in the Western Caribbean for our honeymoon. We did not feel deprived at all, although we hardly left our cabin on the upper deck. If ever two souls were perfectly made for each other, it is us. Once Dawn and I settled into a daily routine and life as husband and wife, new drama awaited us. During work hours, I received a call from an unknown number on my personal mobile phone. I don't usually answer calls from unknown numbers, but I was expecting a call from my doctor to schedule my annual physical. "Hello, Keith. How are you?" "Sharon, you have the nerve to call me? Let me guess, you want me to donate a kidney to Wesley?" "I guess I deserve it, Keith." "No, I'm not asking for anything for Wesley or myself. I'm asking for the kids, Conrad and Jocelyn. They miss you and your eldest daughter. The four of us would like to meet you at Angus Steakhouse Barn on Saturday at 6 p.m., and at our expense. Invite Cheryl if she is in town." "When you say four, does that include Mr. T. Stanton?" "Yes, of course. Wesley is my husband and their father in every sense of the word, so he will be there." "That won't happen. If he's there, I won't be. It's as simple as that. I almost forgot how emotional and dramatic you are. I prefer pragmatism. If you will be there, then I won't come. Goodbye, Sharon." And I ended the call. 30 minutes later, I received another call from the same number. "Please don't hang up on me, Keith. Wesley is generous enough to overlook your shortcomings for the sake of the children. So if you can't be in the same room with him, he won't be there. For the sake of the twins, they want to see you. Will you come?" Knowing that Wesley would not be there, I thought before answering. "The only thing I know for sure is that you are both certified liars. I don't trust a word you say. I'll be there, but if he shows up for even a minute, I'll leave." "Understood. It's a shame you can't get over your ego, but if that's the case, yes, that's understandable. He won't be there. Conrad and Jocelyn are looking forward to seeing you. Will Cheryl be there too? I'd really like to see her. We didn't break up on very good terms. I'm afraid she's studying for her exams and will be out of town this weekend." "Sorry." "I see. She's a smart girl and I'm proud of her. I'll see you Saturday night then." Dawn and I discussed the upcoming event. She believed that Sharon had an ulterior motive for contacting me beyond the twins' supposed burning desire to see me, which she questioned given everything I had told her. I agreed with her and asked her to accompany me for moral support. She agreed to come and support me because she wanted to meet the most incredible she had ever heard of. When we walked into the steakhouse, Jocelyn and Conrad rushed to greet me with hugs. It seemed discreet, as if it had been pre-planned. Perhaps I was too suspicious because of the way we broke up. "Hello, Keith. I assume you are Dawn?" His wife Sharon greeted us both politely. The twins sat on either side of their mother, opposite Dawn and me. "Sharon," I offered briefly, "it's good of you to come. The twins are very happy to contact you again." She lied. After that, Conrad and Jocelyn started sharing their interests and how much they both missed me from that day and how they wanted me to continue to stay in touch with them. They were both almost 17, 2 years younger than Cheryl, whom they asked about. I good-naturedly conveyed that Cheryl loved them very much and missed her little brother and sister, which made them happy. After the waiter took the orders, Sharon revealed her real intentions for inviting me. "I'm not sure how much of our history you've heard, Keith, but our family situation has changed significantly since the last time we spoke. After a series of very unfortunate circumstances, the Stanton family capital was completely depleted. After everything settled down, we found ourselves without any financial means and no place to live. Wesley resumed his work as a children's book illustrator, while I, with no work experience other than being a housewife and raising our family, now work here at this steakhouse as a waitress. I have a discount as an employee, and therefore I can afford to invite you tonight," she offered modestly. Given that Sharon did not slander Cheryl and Dawn, it seemed to me that she did not know they were involved in their financial collapse, and I was not going to divulge that information. "I've heard some things on the news, Sharon, but I'm sure I don't know all the details." "It must be tragic to lose everything you've worked towards your whole life," I said, meaning it with a double meaning. She glanced sideways at me but made no further comment. It seemed she didn't want to upset me, so she ignored my barb. Wesley and I will manage, but my main concern is Conrad and Jocelyn. They are at an age where they need to plan for their college education. Given our financial situation, it pains me to say that we are no longer able to do so for them. I remember that you saved money over the years not only for Cheryl's education but also for the twins. Plus, I remember that you received a $3 million severance package when we ended our marriage, so you are financially able to provide $250,000 each to Conrad and Jocelyn, just as you provided for Cheryl, who is now enjoying your investment. Unfortunately, their grades do not qualify them for scholarships. You were a significant part of their lives until recently, Keith. Don't you think it's time to bury the hatchet and do what's right for these two wonderful children? I know you still have love in your heart for them. I always believed that. Dawn squeezed my hand to reassure me. She knew my volcano was about to erupt. I wanted to tell Sharon everything I could, but not in front of the twins. That's probably why she brought them with her, relying on my feelings for them to keep me in line. I took a break to pull myself together. Sharon mistook my silence for thoughtfulness. I didn't look at Sharon or the twins. I looked at Dawn, the love of my life. She understood my gaze for what it was, seeking her opinion. She smiled in gratitude. Whatever you decide, honey, I'm with you 100%, Dawn interjected. Sharon perked up when she heard Dawn agree. After taking a deep breath, I decided to make my proposal. You're right, Sharon. I still have feelings for them, even though they both chose to cut me out of their lives. But that doesn't mean I don't have compassion. I have an offer to support them and fully fund their higher education. However, my offer comes with 4 unavoidable conditions. First, you and Wesley must both relinquish all parental rights and transfer both children to me in their entirety for $1 each. This is madness, Sharon exclaimed, trying to maintain her composure. They only have 2 years left until they reach adulthood. What difference does it make? Wesley will never agree to this. But out of curiosity, what are the other 3 conditions? Second, they will both move in with Dawn and me and live at our house as their only residence until they graduate from college. Third, they can choose any field of study they want, with the exception of philosophy. If either of them wants a degree in philosophy, they will have to pay for it themselves. Lastly, neither of them should have any contact with you or Wesley until the day of their graduation. I will allow you both to be there and witness their graduation, but if either of you contacts them before this time, or vice versa, the deal will fall through, and the funding will stop. Yes, I know that at 18 they will be adults and able to make their own decisions, but if one of them contacts you, the consequences will be immediate. All funding will stop. Those are the conditions. Take them or leave them. To hell with you, Keith. You can keep your bourgeois philosophy and your money. My children will never submit to your imperial demands. There is no chance that we will agree to even one of your outrageous and unreasonable demands. You manipulated me like a Stradivarius for 17 years. Sharon, never again. Dawn is my life now. Jocelyn, Conrad, I still love you both. I wish you all the best for the future. Come on, Dawn, I said, getting up from the table. I had lost my appetite. I left a $100 bill on the table to cover the cost of our meals and left without another word. 3 weeks later, my phone rang again. Hi, Keith. We've had a lot of discussions about your proposal, and maybe we can come to an agreement on all the points except the no contact clause. It would be difficult for me not to have contact with them for 4 or 5 long years after I've been with them every day since they were born. Can you remove this condition, or at least modify it to allow some basic contact between us during this time without jeopardizing funding for their education? Hello, Sharon. To be honest, I didn't expect a call from you. Regarding your question about the 4 conditions, this is the one that I consider the most important. In my opinion, it would be better for them to completely disown you and your influence. This will give them a chance to resume normal thinking. No, Sharon, no contact, 0. As I said earlier, take it or leave it. She hung up. This made me chuckle. 2 weeks after that call, I received another one. She sounded defeated. Hello, Keith. I want you to know that I hate you for insisting on your petty demands on the children you helped raise for 15 years, but their father and I love them more than our own pride. We're willing to be practical and put our feelings aside for the sake of the twins' well-being until they graduate from college. What date do you want them to move in with you? Let them finish the current school year with us and celebrate this day together. I will come the next day and pick them up. That way, they will have the summer to get used to their new surroundings before starting their last year of school living with us. I won't ask you for a penny to support them. For years after graduation, they will receive their diplomas and be ready for the adventures we call life. Can we do the paperwork at our home? It would be humiliating enough without having to be in the office with a public notary to complete it. I wanted to remind her of the humiliation they deliberately inflicted on me that day, but I restrained myself. I happen to know a notary, but she technically can't notarize documents for her husband. I'll arrange for another notary to come to your apartment on the day I pick them up. Unlike you, I won't demand the twins leave everything behind. Let them pack whatever they want to take with them. I will provide for their every need from that day until they graduate from college. Make sure Conrad and Jocelyn sign the adoption papers when they appear before the judge. Unless they convince him of their wishes to be adopted, they will be returned to you without tuition funding. This is part of the deal. She sighed. We understand, Keith. The kids know what they need to say and do to make it work for them. They won't fight back like Cheryl. I still hate you for doing this. I know, Sharon. I'm completely comfortable with it. A week after my local school graduation, Sharon contacted me one last time, after the final celebration marking the start of the no-contact period, and tearfully told me I could complete the paperwork and take it with me. Dawn knew a bank teller who was a notary. We paid him extra to meet us at their apartment at 2:15 p.m. to complete the paperwork. We arrived at 2 p.m. to discuss the documents before signing. Like Sharon, Wesley looked defeated. His long-term dream of living on a grand scale had turned into failure too quickly. It was humiliating for them. I wondered what philosophy they followed to cope with the new reality. 2 of the documents we discussed were standard waivers of parental rights that would allow me to adopt them both and gain full custody of each child, which would include changing their last name back to Carlisle. They both understood that they would need to sign these documents in front of a notary. The 3rd document was extremely petty on my part, and I thought it might be a stumbling block for Wesley, but I submitted it anyway. It stated that they both admitted that they were selling their rights to their 2 children for the sum of $1 for each child. It had no legal meaning, but I wanted it for myself after they made me pay $1 million for each child. The 4th duplicate document clearly stated the no-contact clause as well as where the twins would live until they graduated from college. I wanted them to know what any violation of this condition would cost their children. What if one of Sharon's parents gets cancer or dies? Shouldn't there be exceptions? Asked Wesley, disappointed. If something like this happens, there is nothing stopping you from contacting me. If I think it's important enough, I'll pass it on, I confirmed. Other than that, do you have any questions? They both nodded sadly in understanding. When the notary arrived, it was a quiet affair. He came and went in less than 10 minutes. After symbolically leaving 2 $1 bills on the table, I collected the documents in a folder and gave them to Dawn for safekeeping. I carried their bags out to the car as Sharon and Wesley said tearful goodbyes to the 2 teenagers. They were silent on the way home, but it was obvious that they were upset. When we arrived, but before we got out of the car, Conrad said, "If you loved us, you wouldn't have put us through all this drama. It's because I love you that I started all this fuss. Hopefully, with time, you'll be able to look at it more broadly. What do you expect us to call you?" "Something respectful. You don't have to call me Dad like you've done for 15 years. You can call me Keith or Sir. You can call her Dawn or Mrs. However, I won't tolerate disrespect. I don't expect you to be happy for now, just be respectful. Do you think you can handle this?" They both nodded. Nothing more was said that could be construed as confrontation. They happily met Cheryl and were excited to see their big sister again. Josh chose the room closest to Cheryl, and Conrad took the one at the end of the hallway. I assumed they would keep to themselves for a while. I understood that they were unhappy with my interference in their lives, but I believed that my investment in their education could serve as a lever for stabilization after their mother's indoctrination. At dinner that night, I explained to the twins that Cheryl would be taking them to a psychiatrist once a week to help them sort through their feelings and cope with the turmoil that had been in their lives since the discovery of their birth parents. I knew that Dr. Kyrie Editon, a psychiatrist, would have a difficult task, but she came highly recommended. I decided not to delay the adoption process in anticipation of their moving to me. I instructed my lawyer to put our case on the agenda for the third week of the summer so that they would have time to adjust before meeting with the judge. As Sharon promised, the adoption process went smoothly. The children were very cooperative. I decided not to inform Sharon about the event, figuring it would not do any good to inform her of what she already knew would happen. I got new ID cards for Conrad and Jocelyn Carlisle. The twins called me sir during their first year with us. Of course, Cheryl still called me daddy, but wisely did not insist that the twins follow her example. It also took time for us adults to adapt to new circumstances, moving from the freedom of life alone in the house to the presence of Cheryl and then the twins, each adding their own dynamic. I decided that they should continue therapy for the first 2 years of college. They switched to another psychiatrist near Georgia Tech on the recommendation of Dr. D. Editon, but kept returning. Thanks to Cheryl's encouragement, as well as Sharon and Wesley's influence, they both decided to study at Georgia Tech. Conrad, who was the most reluctant to adapt to living with me, decided that he wanted to study aerospace engineering. I was shocked when he announced this decision. I couldn't be prouder. Without explanation, Jocelyn chose chemical engineering, another challenging field. The summer after their freshman year at Georgia Tech was over, the ice was broken. Jocelyn called me daddy, just like Cheryl. I didn't say a word but hugged her tightly. Conrad was the last one to come around, but he too resumed addressing me as dad before the start of the next school year. Dawn surprised me. I thought she would be overwhelmed by a house full of unbridled youth, but she rose to the challenge with flying colors, using her legal organizational skills to manage the house. She made us all follow the rules, but she did it with love. Although it was clear that the three had come to love and respect her in her role as my wife and their stepmother, they politely called her Dawn or yes, ma'am. In return, she was pleased. I believe that going to therapy regularly was one of the smartest decisions I made. The smartest thing was to marry Dawn. When Cheryl earned her engineering degree, she immediately took a job at Air Rocketdyne to put her education to work alongside her botanist dad. She fit in perfectly and soon began dating Rory Shepak, a fellow engineer. 2 years later, we all got together again when Wesley and Sharon flew to Atlanta with us to see the twins graduate. It was a touching renewal of relationships on all sides, and Dawn and I gave them space to reconnect. Conrad and Jocelyn looked at me the entire time as Wesley and Sharon hugged them proudly. It was clear that the children recognized my role and place in their lives despite their biological origins. I didn't know what would happen next after the graduation ceremony ended. Now everyone could do what they wanted. All three of my children were free to take their lives in any direction, and I was very proud that I could help them in their development. After spending a lot of time that afternoon and evening with Wesley and Sharon, Conrad and Jocelyn approached me to talk. "Well, we did it, Dad," Conrad said. "That's right," Jocelyn added. "We would never have achieved what we have done if it weren't for you, and we are both very grateful to you. You are our rock, along with Cheryl." Before they left, Mom and Dad strongly insisted that we get a degree in philosophy and follow in their footsteps. We both had no interest in it, so we're glad you stopped that. What surprised us both was how you backed down and told us to choose our own destiny and that you would support any of our career decisions. You have no idea how much this affected us. You were the same dad we knew and loved all our lives. You never changed, always supported us, never pressured us to follow your dreams, but gave us the freedom to follow our own. You're the best dad in the world." Jocelyn added, "That's why we chose the directions we did, because of you. We both wanted to be like you and work with you. With my degree in chemical engineering, I hope to get a job at Aerojet Rocketdyne, working on developing new chemical rocket engines. Considering how much Conrad talks to you about aerospace engineering, we're hoping to add 2 more careers to our list. There are 2 questions you haven't asked us yet, Dad, but we both know you're wondering about them. Let me reassure you, no, we are not changing our last names back to Stanton. We are proud to be your children, both legally and emotionally. Secondly, our home is where you are. When we return, we would both like to continue living with you and our family until we start our own lives. We are not going to go back to live with Mom and Wesley. We will see them and visit them from time to time, but now that we have our degrees, although we will call them Mom and Dad, you will always be our dad. I hope that's okay with you." I had been moved to the point of tears up until this point, not knowing how they would react to me now that Wesley and Sharon were back in their lives. I was so relieved that I started crying. I was not alone in my tears. Dawn and I embraced them in a big family hug. But it was inevitable that the name had to change. 9 months later, I proudly walked Cheryl down the aisle as she became Cheryl Shepak. She and Rory were an adorable couple. I felt that Dawn and I would soon be holding the titles of grandparents. Yes, Wesley and Sharon were there, but they knew better than to try to convince Cheryl to let Wesley walk her down the aisle. God, how I love this girl. The wedding went off without a hitch, with Conrad as Rory's best man and Jocelyn as her maid of honor. 2 years later, Jocelyn ran away to marry her fiancé. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said. "Mom and Dad were very insistent that he be the one to walk me down the aisle instead of you. They said it was only fair since you were leading Cheryl. You know I wouldn't make a problem out of it. Honey, whatever you decide, I'd be fine with it. You should have the right to have your wedding day go the way you want." "You're right, Dad," Jocelyn continued. "What I wanted most was peace and harmony. Running away with Carl made the choice unnecessary. I still love you, Dad, and I still love you, Jocelyn. If you or Carl ever need anything, I know we'll call you," she said teasingly but lovingly. Wesley and Sharon stubbornly stayed together, but Sharon became unhappy due to their constant financial struggles, which naturally made Wesley unhappy as well. Honestly, I wasn't surprised when Conrad casually mentioned that Wesley and Sharon were having affairs as a way to deal with their melancholy. Apparently, their pragmatism allowed them to be intimate with other partners as a practical solution, given their unusual philosophy of life. After all, he allowed her to be intimate with me for 17 years as my lawful wife. None of the children could understand how they could live like this after I was a model to them, and that made me proud. What do you think of our concluding part of the story? In my opinion, this part of the story was one of the most interesting stories I've heard, and I especially liked what the husband came up with. What do you think? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.